The undertaker's wagon rolled past Eleanor Mercer as she stepped off the stagecoach in Cedar Creek, Montana. December 1883. A woman's frozen body lay beneath the canvas, her blue hand dangling over the side. "Third one this month," someone muttered. "Winter ain't even started proper yet." Ellie clutched her carpetbag and watched the wagon disappear. She'd come to cook for a widower with 5 motherless children. She didn't know the town had already buried 3 women this season. She didn't know she'd nearly become the 4th. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far Ellie's story travels. Subscribe and stay until the end. You won't believe what happens next. "You the widow?" The woman's voice cut through the frozen air like a blade. Ellie turned to find 2 women blocking her path, their faces hard as the ice beneath her boots. "I'm Eleanor Mercer. I'm here to—" "We know why you're here." The older woman, wrapped in expensive wool, looked her up and down. "The whole town knows. A young widow traveling alone, answering an advertisement to live with Nathaniel Calloway and his children. I'm a cook. I'm here to work. Is that what they're calling it now?" The younger woman laughed. Sharp, cruel. Ellie's hands tightened on her carpetbag. "I don't know what you're implying, ma'am." "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating fact." The older woman stepped closer. "Nate Calloway's wife has been dead 3 years. He's got 5 children, a struggling ranch, and debts he can't pay. And now he's bringing a strange woman into his home." She shook her head. "I'm Cora Pritchard. My husband is the minister here. And I'm telling you as a Christian duty that whatever you think is waiting for you at that ranch, you're wrong. I think a job is waiting for me." "A job." Cora smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "The last woman who took that job left in the middle of the night. The one before her lasted 2 weeks. They couldn't handle the children. They couldn't handle the isolation. And they certainly couldn't handle the talk." "What talk?" "The talk that follows any woman desperate enough to live alone with a man who isn't her husband." Cora leaned in. "Go home, Miss Mercer. Wherever you came from, go back. There's nothing for you here but shame and regret." Ellie held her ground. "I have no home to go back to." "Then God help you, because no one else will." The women walked away, their boots crunching in the snow. Ellie stood alone in the middle of the street, the cold seeping through her thin coat, her worn boots, her threadbare gloves. She had 47 cents in her pocket, a carpetbag with 2 dresses, and absolutely nowhere else to go. The undertaker's wagon had stopped outside a building at the end of the street. 2 men were carrying the woman's body inside. Frozen stiff, blue-white, young. Ellie forced herself to look away. She walked to the mercantile and sat on the bench outside, pulling her coat tighter against the wind. The cold was different here than in Boston. Sharper, more personal, like it wanted something from her. An old man huddled near the door, wrapped in so many layers, he looked more like a pile of rags than a person. "Gonna be bad this year," he said, not looking at her. "Worst winter in 20 years, maybe 30. "How can you tell?" "The birds left early. The elk are moving down from the mountains already. And my bones." He finally turned, and she saw his face weathered, ancient, one eye, milky white with blindness. "My bones been aching since September. That ain't never wrong." "That's comforting." He laughed, a dry sound like wind through dead leaves. "Comfort ain't something we got much of out here. You the one going to the Calloway place." "Word travels fast." "Only thing that moves fast in Cedar Creek. Everything else is slow. Slow mail, slow law, slow death." He shifted, bones creaking. "You know about Whitfield." "Who?" "Marcus Whitfield. Owns the biggest spread in the valley. Been buying up land for 15 years. Calloway Ranch is one of the last pieces he don't own." The old man spat into the snow. "He don't like being told no, and Nate Calloway keeps telling him no." "What does that have to do with me?" "Maybe nothing, maybe everything." He pulled his rags tighter. "Just watch yourself, miss. People die easy out here, and some deaths are easier than others. Before Ellie could respond, a wagon appeared at the end of the street. The driver was old, weathered, his face all hard angles and suspicion. He pulled the horses to a stop in front of the mercantile. "You the cook?" "Yes." "Been waiting long?" "2 hours." He muttered something under his breath. "Nobody offered you a place inside?" "No." His jaw tightened. "Get in. It's 8 miles to the ranch and the sun's already dropping." Ellie climbed onto the wagon bench. The old man with the prophecies watched her go, his one good eye tracking her until they turned the corner and Cedar Creek disappeared behind them. "Name's Walt Brennan," the driver said. "Foreman at the Calloway place for 23 years. Knew Nate's father, knew his grandfather. I'm Eleanor Mercer. Ellie. I know who you are. Read your letter." Walt kept his eyes on the road. "Widow. No family. Worked as a cook in Boston. Left out some things though, didn't you?" Ellie's stomach tightened. "I told the truth." "Truth ain't the same as the whole truth." He spat over the side of the wagon. "Don't matter to me. I'm not the one who hired you. But you should know what you're walking into. I know there are 5 children. 5 children who ain't had a mother for 3 years. 5 children who've watched 3 cooks come and go. 5 children who've learned not to get attached to anyone because everyone leaves." The words landed hard. "And Mr. Calloway?" Ellie asked. Walt was quiet for a long moment. The horse's breath fogged in the cold air. The wagon wheels creaked against the frozen ground. "Nate's drowning," he said finally. "Has been since Margaret died. Won't admit it. Won't ask for help. Just keeps working, keeps pushing, keeps trying to be mother and father and rancher all at once. Man's running on nothing but stubbornness and coffee. That's not sustainable." "No, it ain't." Walt glanced at her. "That's why he hired you. That's why he was desperate enough to bring a strange woman into his house despite what everyone would say. Everyone being Cora Pritchard, among others. The minister's wife has opinions about everything and shares them with everyone. She's already decided you're either a fortune hunter or a fallen woman. Maybe both." "I'm neither." "I know. I can tell." Walt's voice softened slightly. "You've got honest eyes. Tired but honest. That's more than most folks can say." They rode in silence as the land opened up around them. Endless white fields, dark mountains in the distance, sky so vast it made Ellie feel like a speck of dust on an infinite canvas. "The old man in town mentioned someone named Whitfield," she said. Walt's hands tightened on the reins. "What did he say?" "That Whitfield owns most of the valley. That he wants the Calloway ranch. That Mr. Calloway keeps telling him no. That's the short version. What's the long version?" Walt was quiet for several seconds. Then, "Marcus Whitfield came to this valley 20 years ago with nothing but ambition and a willingness to do whatever it took to get what he wanted. He bought struggling ranches for pennies. He loaned money to desperate men and took their land when they couldn't pay. He's got the sheriff in his pocket, 2 territorial judges on his payroll, and enough hired guns to start a small war. And he wants the Calloway ranch. He wants the water rights. Calloway land sits on the best creek in the valley. Whoever controls that creek controls everything downstream. Whitfield's offered to buy it 3 times. Nate said no 3 times. What happens when Whitfield stops asking nicely?" Walt looked at her, something shifting in his expression. "That's a smart question, Miss Mercer. Smarter than I expected. I've dealt with dangerous men before." "Have you now?" It wasn't a question. Ellie didn't answer. They passed a fence line, the posts newer than the weathered wood around them. A sign hung from the gate, "Whitfield Cattle Company. No trespassing." "That's his land," Walt said. "Starts here, runs all the way to the mountains. Used to be 4 different ranches. Now it's all his." "How did he get it?" "Same way he gets everything. Pressure, patience. And when those don't work..." Walt shrugged. Accidents happen out here. Fences get cut. Cattle go missing. Barns catch fire in the night. Hard to prove anything. Even harder to fight back when you're already struggling. Has he done those things to the Callaway Ranch? Not yet, but he will. Soon as he figures out that Nate ain't never going to sell willingly. They crested a hill, and the ranch came into view below them. A main house, solid log construction smoke rising from the chimney. A large barn, several outbuildings, corrals where horses stood with their breath clouding white. It should have looked peaceful. Instead, it looked like a fortress under siege. "Home sweet home," Walt said dryly. The front door opened before the wagon stopped rolling. A girl stood in the doorway, 12 or 13, her face a mask of cold assessment. Brown hair pulled back tight, dress worn but clean, eyes that had seen too much disappointment to trust easily. "You're late," she said to Walt. "Had to wait for the stage." She could have waited inside the mercantile. Nobody offered. The girl's jaw tightened. She looked at Ellie with the same expression someone might give a stray dog, pity mixed with suspicion. "I'm Sarah Callaway. I run this house." "I'm Eleanor Mercer. I'm here to help you run it." "I don't need help." "Sarah." A man's voice, deep and tired, came from inside. "Let her in. It's cold." Sarah stepped aside, but her eyes never left Ellie's face, measuring, judging, finding her wanting. Ellie climbed down from the wagon and walked into the house. The warmth hit her immediately. Welcome after hours in the cold. A fire burned in a large stone fireplace. The furniture was simple, sturdy, built to last. Everything clean, but worn, organized, but cheerless. A man stood near the fireplace, tall, broad shoulders, dark hair with gray at the temples, eyes that looked like they'd forgotten how to rest. Nathaniel Callaway. "Miss Mercer." He didn't offer his hand, didn't smile. "You made it." "I did." "How was the journey?" "Long." "And the town?" Ellie thought about Cora Pritchard's words, about the frozen woman in the undertaker's wagon, about 2 hours on a bench in the killing cold. "Educational," she said. Something flickered across his face. Almost a smile, but not quite. "I imagine it was." He gestured toward the room. "This is the main room. Kitchen's through there. You'll meet the rest of the children at supper." "The rest?" As if summoned by the words, 4 more children appeared from different doorways. A serious boy, maybe 10, with his father's eyes. A girl around 7 peeking out from behind a chair. A small boy, 5 or so, bouncing on his toes with barely contained energy. And a tiny girl, 3 at most, hiding behind the serious boy's leg. "Daniel, Lily, Jacob, Emma." Nate pointed to each in turn. "Children, this is Miss Mercer. She's going to help with the cooking and the house." Silence. Jacob broke first. "Can you make pie?" "Jacob," Sarah said sharply. "Don't be rude." "It's not rude. It's important. Ma used to make pie." The word hung in the air. Ma. A ghost everyone felt, but no one mentioned. "I can make pie," Ellie said carefully. "What kind did your mother make?" "Apple. It was the best." Jacob's eyes went bright. "Can you make apple pie?" "If we have apples, yes." "We got apples in the cellar," Daniel said quietly. First words he'd spoken. "I helped pick them last fall." "Then I'll make apple pie tomorrow." Jacob's face lit up. Emma peeked out from behind Daniel's leg, curious despite her fear. Even Lily took a step forward. Only Sarah remained unmoved. "The last cook said she'd make pie too," Sarah said. "She left before she could." "I'm not the last cook." "No, you're the 4th. And they all said the same thing. They'd stay. They'd help. They'd make things better." Sarah's voice was flat. "They all lied." "Sarah." Nate's tone carried warning. "It's fine," Ellie said. "She's right to be cautious. She doesn't know me. None of you do." She looked at each child in turn, then at Nate, then back to Sarah. "I'm not going to promise to stay forever. I'm not going to promise everything will be perfect. But I am going to promise this: I'll be honest with you. Every day. About everything. And if I ever have to leave, I'll tell you why, and I'll say goodbye properly. I won't just disappear in the middle of the night." The room was very quiet. Emma tugged on Daniel's sleeve. "I'm hungry," she whispered. "Supper's at 6. Sarah said, her voice slightly less cold than before. "The men eat first, then us. Pa likes his coffee strong and his eggs soft. Daniel won't eat onions. Lily needs her toast crusts cut off. Jacob eats anything but talks too much. Emma won't eat unless someone she trusts feeds her." "What about you?" Sarah's chin lifted. "I'm not your concern." She turned and walked away, disappearing down a hallway. Nate exhaled slowly. "I'm sorry. She's protecting her family. I understand." Ellie picked up her carpet bag. "Where's my room?" "Down the hall, last door on the right. It's small, but it's private." "Private is all I need." She walked down the hallway, feeling eyes on her back. The room was exactly as promised. Small, simple, clean. A bed, a chair, a washstand, a window looking out at snow-covered hills. She set down her carpet bag and sat on the bed. Her hands were shaking. From the cold, she told herself. Just the cold. The kitchen was a disaster. Not dirty. Sarah had clearly kept it scrubbed and organized, but chaotic in the way of a household run by necessity rather than skill. Mismatched pots, dull knives, a stove that looked like it hadn't been properly cleaned in months. Ellie rolled up her sleeves. By the time the ranch hands came for supper, she had coffee brewing biscuits in the oven and a pot of stew bubbling on the stove. Not fancy, but solid. Real food. The men filed in, 5 of them, including Walt, their faces wind-burned and tired. They stopped when they saw the table set properly, smelled the food, registered that something had changed. "Hot damn," one of them breathed. Young, maybe 20, with sandy hair and an easy grin. "Is that actual stew, Pete?" Walt said warningly. "What I'm just saying. Last time we had stew that didn't taste like boot leather was—" He stopped. "Well, a long time." They sat down and ate like men who'd forgotten what good food tasted like. No one talked. They just shoveled food into their mouths, sopping up gravy with biscuits, draining coffee cups that Ellie refilled without being asked. When they finished the one called, Pete leaned back and sighed. "Ma'am, I don't know where you came from, but I hope you never go back." "Pete," Walt said again, "I'm being polite. You're being familiar." "It's all right," Ellie said. "Thank you, Pete. I'm glad you enjoyed it." The men left, still murmuring about the food. Walt lingered in the doorway. "That was good," he said. "Real good. Thank you. The children will be harder to please. I know." He nodded and left. Ellie cleared the dishes and set the table again, this time for smaller appetites. When the children came in, she was ready. Jacob ate everything put in front of him and asked for seconds. Lily nibbled carefully, watching Ellie with cautious curiosity. Daniel ate steadily, methodically, like someone who'd learned to treat food as fuel rather than pleasure. Emma sat on Sarah's lap and turned her face away every time Ellie approached. Sarah ate nothing. "You need to eat," Ellie said quietly. "I'm not hungry." "You've been working all day. You're hungry." Sarah's eyes flashed. "Don't tell me what I am." "Sarah." Nate's voice from the doorway. He'd come in silently, still in his work clothes, exhaustion carved into every line of his face. "Eat your supper." "I said I'm not—" "And I said eat." Father and daughter stared at each other. Something passed between them. Old arguments, old wounds, old grief that had never healed. Sarah picked up her spoon and began to eat. Nate sat down at the head of the table. Ellie served him without a word. Stew, biscuits, coffee. He ate mechanically, his mind clearly elsewhere. "Miss Mercer." "Yes." "Thank you for the meal." You're welcome. The children's bedtime is 8 o'clock. Emma first, then Jacob, then the others. Sarah usually handles it, but I can help. You don't have to. I know. He looked at her, then really looked at her, and something in his expression shifted. Not trust, not yet. But something close to hope. It was gone, almost immediately buried beneath exhaustion and caution. Good night, Miss Mercer. Good night, Mr. Calloway. Putting the children to bed was like conducting a small war. Jacob didn't want to stop talking. Lily wanted a story. Emma screamed when Ellie tried to pick her up, clinging to Sarah with desperate strength. She doesn't know you yet, Sarah said, not unkindly. Give her time. How much time? With Emma could be weeks, could be months. She watched Ma die. She was in the room when it happened. She doesn't trust women anymore. The words hit Ellie like a physical blow. She was 3 months old. She doesn't remember it. But something in her knows. Sarah shifted Emma on her hip. I'll put her down. You handle Jacob. He'll talk your ear off, but eventually he runs out of words. It took an hour to get all the children settled. By the end, Ellie was exhausted in a way she hadn't been in months. She found Sarah in the kitchen washing the last of the dishes. Let me help. I can do it. I know you can, but you don't have to. Sarah's hands stilled in the water. She didn't turn around. Why are you here? She asked quietly. Because I need work. There's work everywhere. Why here? Why a ranch in the middle of nowhere with 5 children and a father who barely talks and a town that's already decided you're a scandal? Ellie picked up a towel and began drying the dishes Sarah handed her. My husband died 2 years ago. He left me with nothing but debts. His family threw me out. I took whatever work I could find, scrubbing floors, mending clothes, cooking in boarding houses. I came here because your father's advertisement was the first thing in 2 years that offered me a real chance. Room, board, fair wages, a place to be. That's it. Just survival. Isn't survival enough? Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then, Ma used to say that survival was just the beginning, that you had to survive first before you could start living. She sounds wise. She was. Sarah handed her the last pot. She was the wisest person I ever knew. Tell me about her. Sarah went very still. You don't have to, Ellie added quickly. I'd like to know if you want to share. The girl's hands gripped the edge of the basin. Her shoulders trembled slightly. She was kind, Sarah said finally. Not soft, she could be hard when she needed to be, but kind. She remembered everyone's birthday. She never raised her voice. She could make Pa smile just by looking at him. How did she die? Emma's birth. Sarah's voice went flat. There was too much bleeding. The doctor came too late. She held on for 3 hours, just long enough to name the baby and say goodbye to each of us. And you were there. I held her hand at the end. I promised I'd take care of everyone, that I'd make sure the little ones remembered her. Ellie set down the towel. Sarah, you were 9 years old. I know how old I was. That's too young to carry that kind of promise. Someone had to. No. Ellie turned to face her. No one had to. Not a 9-year-old child. Your mother shouldn't have asked that of you. Sarah's eyes went wide, then furious. Don't you dare. Don't you dare talk about my mother. I'm not criticizing her. I'm sure she didn't mean to burden you. But that's what happened, isn't it? She gave you a job you were too young to do, and you've been killing yourself trying to do it ever since. Tears spilled down Sarah's face. Angry tears. Frustrated tears. You don't know anything. I know what it looks like when someone's carrying too much. I know what it feels like to be alone with responsibility you never asked for. And I know that you're 12 years old, and you're exhausted, and you're scared, and you're angry at everyone, your mother for dying, your father for not being enough, the world for being so unfair. Sarah's whole body shook. I'm here now, Ellie said softly. I'm not your mother. I'm not trying to replace her. But I'm here and I can help if you'll let me. The girl stood frozen for a long moment. Then she crumbled. Ellie caught her as she fell, held her as she sobbed, 3 years of grief and exhaustion and rage pouring out in the small warm kitchen while the fire crackled and the wind howled outside. She didn't say anything. She just held on. When the sobs finally quieted, Sarah pulled back, wiping her face roughly. "Sorry." "Don't be. I got your dress wet." "It'll dry." Sarah almost smiled. Almost. "You're strange, Miss Mercer." "I've been told." "Pa said you were stubborn." "Also true." "Good." Sarah took a shaky breath. "You'll need to be. This family breaks people." "I don't break easy." "We'll see." She walked out of the kitchen, her footsteps fading down the hall. Ellie stood alone in the firelight, her heart aching, her mind racing. She'd come to Montana looking for a job. She was starting to think she'd found something else entirely. It was nearly midnight when Ellie heard the sound. Footsteps in the hall, the creak of a door, then silence. She got out of bed and followed the sound to the kitchen. Nate sat at the table, a bottle of whiskey in front of him, his head in his hands. The fire had burned down to embers. Shadows filled the room. She should have gone back to bed, should have given him privacy. Instead, she pulled out a chair and sat down across from him. He looked up. His eyes were red, his face haggard. "Miss Mercer, I heard something. I wanted to make sure everyone was all right." "Everyone's fine." He laughed bitterly. "We're always fine. That's what we tell ourselves." She waited. "Today's the anniversary," he said. 3 years exactly. I watched her die in that room down the hall, held her hand while the life bled out of her, and there wasn't a damn thing I could do to stop it. I'm sorry." "Everyone's sorry. Sorry doesn't bring her back." He poured whiskey into a glass, stared at it, didn't drink. "I keep thinking I should be past this by now. It's been 3 years. Other men lose their wives and move on, find someone new, build a new life. Other men haven't lost Margaret." He looked at her sharply. "I don't know her," Ellie said. "But I know she mattered. I know the hole she left isn't something you can just fill with time or another person. Grief doesn't work that way." "What does grief work like?" "Like a wound that never fully heals. It scabs over and you think you're better, and then something tears it open again, and you're right back where you started." Nate stared at her. "You sound like you know." "My husband died 2 years ago." "You miss him?" The question was direct, raw, deserving of an honest answer. "No." The word came out before she could stop it. He wasn't a good man. He gambled. He lied. He got himself killed over debts he should never have had. When he died, I felt relief. She forced herself to meet Nate's eyes. "I've never told anyone that. The guilt of it has been eating me alive." Silence stretched between them. "That's different," Nate said finally. "Is it? Loss is loss. The shape of it changes, but the weight is the same." "I loved Margaret." "I know. I can see it in everything, this house, your children, the way you talk about her. She was lucky to be loved like that. She died screaming. She died afraid. She died begging me to save her, and I couldn't." His voice broke. "How is that lucky?" Ellie reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. He went very still. "You were there," she said. "At the end, when it mattered most, you were there. You held her hand. You told her you loved her. You promised to take care of your children. That's not nothing, Mr. Calloway. That's everything." His hand turned under hers, fingers closing around her palm. Rough skin, calluses, warmth. "Nate," he said quietly. "Call me Nate." Nate. Ellie. They sat in the darkness, hands clasped across the table. Two broken people finding unexpected comfort in shared pain. Outside, the wind picked up. Snow began to fall. Winter was coming. The worst winter in 20 years, if the old man in town was right. But in that moment, in that small, warm kitchen, neither of them was thinking about the cold. The next morning, Ellie woke to screaming. She was out of bed and running before she was fully conscious. The sound was coming from outside. High terrified a child's voice. She burst through the front door into blinding white. Snow everywhere. A foot of it, maybe more, fallen overnight. And in the middle of the yard, Jacob standing over something dark in the white expanse. "Miss Ellie! Miss Ellie! Come quick!" She ran to him, her bare feet burning in the snow. It was a dog, a big one, half-frozen blood staining the white around it. "It just came out of the snow," Jacob said, his voice shaking. "It just appeared and fell down, and it's hurt Miss Ellie. It's hurt bad." The dog lifted its head. Yellow eyes, gray fur matted with ice and blood, a wound on its side deep and ugly. "That ain't a dog," Walt's voice came from behind them. He'd come out of the bunkhouse, rifle in hand. "That's a wolf. Step back, boy." "No." Jacob threw himself over the animal. "You're not going to shoot it. It's wild, Jacob. It's dangerous. It's hurt. It came here for help. Animals don't come to people for help. They come because they're desperate, and desperate animals attack." "Walt." Nate's voice sharp and commanding. He'd appeared on the porch, still pulling on his coat. "Put the rifle down." "Nate, put it down." Walt lowered the weapon, his face tight with disapproval. Nate crossed the yard and crouched beside the wolf. It watched him with those yellow eyes, too weak to growl, too exhausted to fight. "Trap wound," Nate said. "Looks like it chewed through its own leg to get free." He looked at Jacob. "You want to save it?" "Yes, Pa, please." "Then you're responsible for it. Feeding it, caring for it, cleaning up after it. You understand?" "Yes, Pa." Nate stood. "Ellie, get hot water and clean cloth. Walt, help me carry it to the barn." "This is a mistake," Walt muttered. "Wolf's a wolf, can't change its nature." "Maybe not, but we can give it a chance to try." They carried the wolf to the barn and laid it on a bed of hay. Ellie brought water and cloth. Nate cleaned the wound while the animal lay still, watching them with those unnatural eyes. "Will it live?" Jacob asked. "Don't know. Wound's deep. It's lost a lot of blood." "But you saved it. You're going to try." Nate looked at his son, small and fierce and desperately hopeful. "Yeah," he said. "We're going to try." That afternoon, as Ellie was preparing dinner, a rider appeared on the ridge. Walt saw him first. His whole body went rigid. "Nate, company." The rider descended slowly, unhurried, like a man who owned everything he surveyed. He was well-dressed, his coat expensive, his horse a beautiful black thoroughbred that probably cost more than everything in Ellie's carpet bag combined. He stopped in the middle of the yard and waited. Nate walked out to meet him. Ellie watched from the kitchen window. "Whitfield." "Calloway." The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Cold day for a visit, I know. But I heard you had some excitement last night." "News travels fast." "It does when it involves wolves appearing on doorsteps. Some might call that an omen. Some might call it a hungry animal looking for shelter." Whitfield dismounted, his movements smooth and controlled. He was older than Nate, maybe 50, with silver hair and a face that had probably been handsome before ambition hardened it. "I'll get right to the point. I'm prepared to offer you $12,000 for this property. That's $3,000 more than market value." The answer's still no. "I haven't even—" "You've asked 3 times. I've said no 3 times. What makes you think the 4th will be different?" Whitfield's smile faded slightly. "Times change, Calloway. Circumstances change. I understand you've had some difficulties lately. Fences needing repair. cattle moving slower than usual. And now a new woman in your house, which I'm sure is causing all sorts of talk in town." Ellie's hands tightened on the windowsill. "My circumstances are my business," Nate said. "Of course. But this valley is my business. Everything that happens here affects me, including—" Whitfield's eyes drifted to the kitchen window, meeting Ellie's gaze across the distance. "Who my neighbors choose to associate with. If you've got something to say about Miss Mercer, say it plain." "I wouldn't dream of it. A man's household is his own affair. I'm simply here to remind you that my offer stands, whenever you're ready to be reasonable." "I won't be." Whitfield mounted his horse. "We'll see. Winter's coming Callaway, and this one's going to be brutal. Sometimes it takes hardship to help people see clearly." He rode away without waiting for a response. Nate stood in the yard watching him go. His hands were fists at his sides. Ellie stepped outside. That was him, Whitfield. That was him. He's not going to stop. No. Nate turned to face her. His eyes were hard, but beneath the hardness was something else. Fear. Not for himself, for everything he stood to lose. No, he's not. That night, the temperature dropped 20 degrees. The wind howled against the walls like something alive and hungry. Snow piled against doors and windows. The fire in the main room had to be fed constantly just to keep the cold at bay. Ellie couldn't sleep. She lay in her narrow bed, listening to the storm, thinking about Whitfield's words. Sometimes it takes hardship to help people see clearly. It sounded like a threat. It sounded like a promise. Around midnight, she heard crying. She followed the sound to the children's room. Emma sat upright in her bed, tears streaming down her face, arms reaching toward something that wasn't there. "Mama," she sobbed. "Mama, Mama, Mama." Sarah was already there trying to comfort her, but Emma pushed her away. "She does this sometimes," Sarah said, exhaustion heavy in her voice. "Nightmares. Nothing helps." Ellie approached the bed slowly. "Emma, sweetheart, can you hear me?" The little girl's eyes were open, but unfocused, still trapped in whatever terror had found her in sleep. Ellie began to sing. It was an old song, one her mother had sung to her when she was small. A lullaby about stars and ships and safe harbors. Her voice was nothing special, rough from disuse, uncertain in the melody, but she sang anyway. Emma's crying slowed. Her eyes focused. She looked at Ellie, really looked at her for the first time since she'd arrived. "More," she whispered. Ellie sang another verse, then another. Emma's eyes drifted closed. Her breathing steadied. She slept. Sarah stared at her. She hasn't let anyone sing to her since Ma died. Maybe she was ready. Maybe. Sarah's voice was thick. Or maybe you're different. I'm not different. I'm just here. Same thing. The storm raged outside, but inside in the small, warm room, something had changed. Ellie looked at the sleeping child, at the exhausted girl, at the life she'd somehow stumbled into. She'd come to Montana looking for work. She was starting to think she'd found a family. The storm lasted 3 days. 3 days of wind that screamed like something dying. 3 days of snow piling against windows until the glass cracked from the pressure. 3 days of Ellie and the children huddled around the fire while Nate and the men fought to keep the cattle alive. On the second night, Pete came in with frostbite on 3 fingers. "Damn gloves tore," he said through chattering teeth. "Didn't notice till I couldn't feel nothing." Ellie sat him by the fire and examined the damage. The fingers were waxy white, the skin hard to the touch. She'd seen this before in Boston on men who worked the docks in winter. "I need hot water. Not boiling, just warm, and cloth." Sarah moved without being asked, filling a basin, bringing clean rags. She'd stopped questioning Ellie's orders somewhere around the second day. Survival had a way of stripping away pride. Ellie worked on Pete's hand for an hour, slowly warming the frozen tissue, watching for the flush of returning blood. When the color finally came back pink and angry, Pete nearly cried with relief. "You saved my fingers, ma'am." "They're not saved yet. You need to keep them warm and dry for the next week. No work outside." "But the cattle? We'll have to manage without you. Unless you'd rather lose the hand entirely." Pete shut up after that. Nate found her in the kitchen later, washing blood and dead skin from her hands. He stood in the doorway, snow still melting in his hair, exhaustion carved into every line of his face. "Walt told me what you did. It wasn't much. It was enough." He stepped closer. "Where'd you learn that treating frostbite, Boston winters aren't kind either? I worked in a boarding house near the docks, saw a lot of frozen men." "You're full of surprises, Ellie Mercer." "I prefer to think of myself as practical." He almost smiled. Almost. Practical's good. Practical keeps people alive. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows. Somewhere in the barn, the wolf Jacob had saved was healing, slowly, eating scraps, watching everyone with those yellow eyes. "How bad is it out there?" Ellie asked. Nate's face darkened. "Bad. We've lost 6 head already. Frozen where they stood. The rest are crowded in the barn, but if this keeps up much longer—" He didn't finish. He didn't have to. Whitfield's cattle. His men drove them to the south pastures before the storm hit. He knew it was coming. Had time to prepare. Nate's jaw tightened. "We didn't." How did he know? Same way he knows everything. Money, connections, people who owe him favors. Nate leaned against the doorframe, suddenly looking 10 years older. "He's been doing this for 20 years, Ellie, waiting for exactly the right moment to squeeze. And I walked right into it. You couldn't have known the storm would be this bad." "I should have. The signs were there. I was too busy with other things." His eyes met hers, and she understood what he meant. Too busy with her arrival. With the disruption she'd caused. With the talk in town and Whitfield's visit, and everything that had happened since she stepped off that stagecoach. "This isn't your fault," she said firmly. "Isn't it?" "No. Whitfield would have found another way. Another angle. You said it yourself, he's been doing this for 20 years. If it wasn't the storm, it would have been something else." Nate was quiet for a long moment. Then he pushed off the doorframe and walked to the window, staring out at the white chaos beyond. "My father built this ranch with his bare hands. Came out here with nothing but a horse and a dream. He died in that barn, trying to save cattle from a fire that Whitfield's men probably set, though we could never prove it." His voice was steady, but his hands shook slightly. "I promised him I'd never let this place go, that I'd pass it on to my children the way he passed it to me. You will. How I'm in debt, Ellie. Deep. The bank in town is friendly with Whitfield. They could call my loan anytime they want. One bad season, one more disaster, and it's over." Ellie moved to stand beside him. Outside, the snow swirled in patterns that looked almost intentional, like some vast hand was writing messages in the storm. "Then we make sure there are no more disasters. I told you I'm not leaving. I meant it." He turned to look at her. In the dim light of the kitchen, with the fire flickering behind them and the storm raging outside, something passed between them. Not attraction, not exactly. Something deeper. Recognition. Alliance. Two people choosing to face the impossible together. "You're a strange woman, Ellie Mercer." "So I've been told." That wasn't an insult. I didn't take it as one. The moment stretched warm and fragile. Then Jacob's voice shattered it. "Pa, Pa, the wolf's awake." They found the boy in the barn, kneeling beside the makeshift bed they'd made for the injured animal. The wolf was sitting up for the first time, its yellow eyes alert, its ears tracking every sound. "Look, Pa, he's getting better." Nate crouched down, studying the animal with a practiced eye. The wound on its side was healing cleanly, new pink skin visible beneath the scab. The wolf watched him without fear, without aggression. Just watching. "Looks like he might make it after all." I told you we could save him." Jacob threw his arms around his father's neck. "Can we keep him, Pa? Please. Jacob, wolves aren't pets. He's not a regular wolf. He came to us. He chose us. That means something, doesn't it?" Nate looked at Ellie over his son's head. She saw the war in his eyes, practical concerns versus a father's desire to make his child happy. "We'll see," he said finally. "If he heals, and he doesn't cause trouble, maybe. But the first sign of aggression toward the livestock or the family, he goes." "Understood." "Yes, Pa. I promise I'll take care of him. I'll teach him to be good." The wolf watched this exchange with unsettling intelligence. When Jacob reached out to touch its head, it didn't flinch. Just let the boy's hand rest on its fur, those yellow eyes never leaving Nate's face. "What are you going to name him?" Lily asked from the barn door. She'd followed them out wrapped in a blanket, her small face bright with curiosity. "Ghost," Jacob said immediately, because he appeared out of the snow like a ghost. "That's stupid. Is not, is too, enough." Sarah's voice cut through the argument. She stood behind Lily Emma on her hip, her expression unreadable. "It's freezing out here. Everyone back inside." The children obeyed, still bickering about the name. Ellie lingered, watching Nate watch the wolf. "You don't think this is a good idea," she said. "I think it's probably a terrible idea. Wolves are wild. They don't belong with people." But my son hasn't smiled like that in 3 years." Nate stood brushing hay from his knees. "Since Margaret died, he's been so angry, so lost. If this animal gives him something to care about, something to hope for, maybe it's worth the risk." "That's a big maybe. Everything in my life right now is a big maybe." He met her eyes. "Including you." Ellie didn't look away. "Is that what I am? A risk. The biggest one I've taken in years. Are you sorry?" The question hung between them, dangerous and necessary. "No," Nate said quietly. "Not yet." He walked back to the house, leaving her alone in the barn with a healing wolf and a heart that suddenly felt too large for her chest. The storm broke on the 4th day. The silence was almost shocking after so much noise. Ellie woke to stillness, to weak sunlight filtering through ice-crusted windows, to a world that looked like it had been remade in crystal and white. The damage was worse than anyone had feared. 12 cattle dead, frozen solid in the fields. 2 sections of fence completely destroyed. The roof of the equipment shed had collapsed under the weight of the snow, and everywhere drift so deep that movement was nearly impossible. Walt delivered the assessment in the kitchen, his face grim. "We're hurt bad, Nate. Real bad. Without those cattle, we can't make the spring sale numbers. Without the spring sale, we can't pay the bank." "How short are we?" "At least $2,000. Maybe more." Nate absorbed this in silence. Ellie watched his face, saw the weight settle onto shoulders that were already carrying too much. "What about the timber rights?" he asked finally. "The north section's got good trees. We could sell logging access. Already thought of that. Problem is, the only buyer with cash right now is Whitfield. And if we sell him logging rights, he'll strip the land bare and claim damages on our water supply. Then he's got legal grounds to challenge our creek access. There has to be another way. If there is, I can't see it." Silence fell over the kitchen. Sarah stood by the stove, her face pale. Daniel sat at the table, his young eyes old with understanding. Even Jacob was quiet, sensing the weight of adult fears. "We could sell something else," Daniel said suddenly. Everyone looked at him. "The horses. We got 8. We only need 4 for work. The others are extras. And Duke." He named the big bay stallion that was Nate's pride. "Duke's worth at least $500. Maybe more." Nate's expression flickered with pain. Duke had been Margaret's horse once, the last living connection to her aside from the children. "Daniel, I know Pa. I know what Duke meant to Ma. But she'd want us to keep the ranch more than she'd want us to keep a horse. The boy's voice was steady, but his hands trembled. That's what she'd say. I know it is. Ellie felt tears sting her eyes. 10 years old, and already sacrificing. Already putting family before sentiment. Nate was quiet for a long moment. Then he crossed the room and put his hand on Daniel's shoulder. You're right, he said roughly. She would say exactly that. So we sell Duke. We sell Duke, and the 2 mares we don't need, and anything else that'll bring money. Nate looked around the kitchen at his family, his employees, the woman who'd stumbled into their lives 2 weeks ago and somehow become essential. We're going to survive this, all of us. Together. The word together seemed to include Ellie. She felt it settle over her like a blanket, warm and heavy. 2 days later, Nate rode into Cedar Creek with Daniel to arrange the horse sales. They were gone for hours. Ellie kept busy with the children, with the cooking, with the 1,000 small tasks that filled her days now. But her mind kept wandering to the town, to what Nate might be facing there. When the wagon finally appeared on the ridge, she was at the window before she realized she'd moved. Something was wrong. Nate was driving, his posture rigid. Daniel sat beside him, his face hidden. And in the back of the wagon, where the horse money should have been, sat nothing but empty space. Ellie met them in the yard. What happened? Nate climbed down from the wagon. His jaw was tight, his eyes blazing with barely contained fury. The horses are gone. Gone? What do you mean gone? Sold, but not by us. He pulled a piece of paper from his pocket and handed it to her. Whitfield got there first, bought up every horse in the territory for twice market value. Nobody will deal with us now. They're all too afraid of losing his business. Ellie stared at the paper. It was a notice from the livestock dealer in town, expressing regrets, explaining that Mr. Whitfield had made an exclusive arrangement. He can do that. He can do whatever he wants. He owns the dealer, owns the bank, owns half the damn town. Nate's voice cracked. We rode 8 hours for nothing, and now everyone knows how desperate we are. Daniel hadn't moved from the wagon. His shoulders shook slightly, though whether from cold or something else Ellie couldn't tell. Daniel, she said gently, come inside. You need to warm up. The boy climbed down, his face streaked with frozen tears. I thought I was helping, he whispered. I thought selling Duke would fix everything. Ellie put her arms around him. He stiffened at first, unused to comfort from anyone but Sarah. But then he collapsed against her, sobbing, the way children do when the world proves crueler than they expected. You did help, she said. You showed your father what courage looks like. That matters more than any horse. But we're still going to lose the ranch. No. Ellie looked up at Nate over the boy's head. No, we're not. That night after the children were asleep, Ellie found Nate in the barn. He was sitting on a hay bale, staring at nothing, a bottle of whiskey beside him that he hadn't touched. The wolf ghost, as Jacob insisted on calling it, watched him from its corner, those yellow eyes unblinking. I can't figure a way out of this, Nate said without looking up. I've been sitting here for hours running numbers, thinking through options, and there's nothing. Whitfield's got us cornered. Ellie sat down beside him. What about the spring planting? If we had a good crop? We're not farmers, never have been. This land's good for grazing, not growing. And even if we tried, we'd need seed money we don't have. What about borrowing from somewhere else? Another bank, another territory. No one lends to a man who's already in debt, especially not when Whitfield's spreading word that we're about to go under. Nate finally looked at her. He's thought of everything, Ellie. Every angle, every escape. He's been planning this for years. Then we need to think of something he hasn't planned for. Like what? She didn't have an answer. The impossibility of their situation pressed down on her, suffocating and complete. When I came here, she said slowly, I had nothing, less than nothing. I was running from creditors, from shame, from a life that had fallen apart so completely, I couldn't see how to put it back together. And you know what I learned? What? That sometimes the only way out is through. Straight through the worst of it without stopping, without looking back. You can't outrun disaster, Nate. You can only outlast it. Outlast Whitfield. He laughed bitterly. He's got more money than God. He can wait forever. But he won't. Men like him are impatient. They want what they want, and they want it now. That's why he's pushing so hard, spreading rumors, buying up horses, trying to force your hand before spring. Ellie leaned forward. What if we just don't break? What if we hold on day by day, week by week, until he gets tired of waiting? And starve in the meantime, if necessary. Nate stared at her. In the dim light of the barn, with the wolf watching from the shadows and the cold pressing in from all sides, something shifted between them. You're serious. I'm serious. You'd stay through all that. The hunger, the hardship, the whole town talking about us. The town's already talking, and I've been hungry before. She met his eyes. I told you I wasn't leaving. I meant it. He reached out slowly, his hand finding hers in the darkness. His fingers were rough, calloused, warm despite the cold. Why? He asked. Why do you care so much about this place, about us? It was a question Ellie had been avoiding even in her own mind. But sitting here with his hand in hers and his desperate eyes searching her face, she couldn't avoid it anymore. Because you gave me a chance when no one else would. Because your children are starting to trust me. Because Sarah smiled at me yesterday for the first time since I arrived, and it felt like winning a war. Her voice dropped. Because when I'm here, I feel like I matter. Like I'm more than just a failed wife, a burden, a scandal. I feel like I'm someone worth knowing. Nate's grip tightened on her hand. You are someone worth knowing, Ellie. You're the most remarkable person I've met since... He stopped. Since Margaret she knew. The words he couldn't say. I'm not trying to replace her, Ellie said quietly. I know. That's not what I... He shook his head, frustrated with his own inability to express what he meant. You're different. Everything about you is different. And I don't know what to do with that. You don't have to do anything. Just let me help. Let me be part of this family, whatever that looks like. I'm not asking for anything more. The wolf shifted in its corner, and both of them startled at the movement. Ghost had risen to its feet, those yellow eyes fixed on the barn door. A moment later, they heard it too. Hoofbeats approaching fast. Nate was on his feet instantly, reaching for the rifle he kept by the door. Stay here. Like hell. They went out together into the frozen night. A rider was coming down the ridge, pushing his horse, hard snow spraying in his wake. That's Pete, Nate said, squinting. What's he doing out this late? Pete reined in hard, nearly throwing himself from the saddle. Boss, the south fence. Someone's cutting it. What now in the middle of the night? I saw lanterns. At least 3 men. They're driving the cattle through, trying to scatter them into Whitfield's land. Nate was already moving toward the stable. Wake Walt. Get everyone armed. We're riding out. Nate! Ellie grabbed his arm. This could be a trap. Whitfield could be trying to provoke you into something. Maybe. But if I don't stop them, we'll lose everything we have left. He pulled free and ran for the horses. Within minutes, Nate, Walt, Pete, and Charlie were mounted and riding hard toward the south pasture. Ellie stood in the yard watching them disappear into the darkness, her heart hammering. Sarah appeared at her side. What's happening? Someone's attacking the fence line, trying to scatter the cattle. Whitfield. Probably. Sarah's face was pale but determined. What do we do? Ellie looked at her. This girl who'd been forced to grow up too fast, who'd carried her family on her shoulders for 3 years, who was standing here now asking for direction instead of giving it. We get the children to the cellar, we barricade the doors, and we wait. That's it, we just wait. Sometimes waiting is the hardest fight of all. They roused the younger children from sleep, wrapped them in blankets, carried Emma, who was too groggy to walk. The cellar was cold and dark, smelling of earth and stored vegetables. Jacob clutched his blanket, his voice trembling. Is Pa going to be okay? Your father's the strongest man I know, Ellie said. He's going to be fine. How do you know? Because he has too much to come back to. The hours that followed were the longest of Ellie's life. She sat in the darkness with the children gathered around her, listening to the wind, listening for hoofbeats, listening for gunshots. Sarah sat rigid beside her Daniel on her other side. Jacob had finally fallen asleep, his head in Ellie's lap. Emma was curled against her sister thumb in her mouth. "Tell us a story," Lily whispered. Ellie's mind went blank. Then, without planning to, she began to speak. Once upon a time there was a woman who thought she had nothing left. Her husband was dead, her home was gone, and everyone she knew had turned their backs on her. She was alone in the world with nothing but a carpet bag and a broken heart. "What did she do?" Lily asked. "She got on a train. She traveled across the whole country, watching the land change, from cities to farms to prairies to mountains. And she arrived in a place so cold and empty that she thought she might die." "But she didn't die," Daniel said. It wasn't a question. No, she didn't die. Because in that cold, empty place, she found something she hadn't expected. She found a family that needed her. Children who were brave and strong and hurt. A man who was trying so hard to hold everything together that he'd forgotten how to ask for help. What happened to her? Ellie looked at the faces around her, illuminated by the single candle they'd brought to the cellar. These children who'd become hers without her planning it. This life that had claimed her when she wasn't looking. "She found out that home isn't a place," she said softly. "It's the people who choose you, and she was chosen." Silence fell. Even the wind seemed to pause. Then from above, the sound of hoofbeats. Ellie was on her feet instantly. "Stay here." "But," Sarah started. "Stay. Here." She climbed the cellar stairs and pressed her ear to the door. The hoofbeats had stopped. Voices muffled by distance and wood. Then footsteps on the porch. The front door opened. "Ellie! Ellie! It's me!" Nate's voice. Exhausted, but alive. She threw open the cellar door and ran to him. He was covered in snow and mud, his face scratched, his clothes torn. But he was whole. He was standing. "The cattle. Safe. We got there in time. They'd only cut one section of fence. We drove the herd back and repaired it." He swayed slightly, and she caught his arm. "We caught one of them. Whitfield's man. He's not denying anything." "You have proof. I have a witness." Nate's eyes were hard. A witness who's willing to talk to the territorial marshal. For a moment Ellie couldn't speak. Then, "You did it. You actually did it." "We did it." He reached out and touched her face, a gesture so tender it made her heart ache. "I couldn't have. When I was riding out there not knowing if I'd come back, all I could think about was you. Was getting back to you." "Nate. I know this isn't the time. I know we've got 100 problems still to face. But I need you to know that you're not just a cook to me anymore. You're not just someone who helps with the children. You're..." He struggled for words. "You're the reason I'm still fighting. The reason I believe we can win." Behind them, the cellar door creaked open. Sarah's face appeared, followed by Daniel's. Then the younger children, all of them wide-eyed and hopeful. "Pa..." Jacob's voice was small. "Did we win?" Nate turned to his children. In the dim light of the kitchen, exhausted and battered but unbowed, he smiled. "Yeah, son. We won tonight." Jacob threw himself at his father, wrapping his arms around his waist. Lily followed, then Daniel, then Sarah, with Emma in her arms. They stood there, a tangle of limbs and tears and relief, a family that had nearly broken, but hadn't. Ellie watched from a few steps away, not wanting to intrude on the moment. Then Sarah looked up. "Miss Ellie." "Yes." "You're part of this family now." The girl's voice was steady. "You know that, right?" Ellie's eyes burned. "I'm starting to." "Good." Sarah shifted Emma on her hip. Because we're going to need you for what comes next. What comes next? Nate lifted his head from the embrace. His eyes met Ellie's across the chaos of his children. Whitfield's not going to stop because we won one battle. He's going to be angry. He's going to escalate. I know. It's going to get worse before it gets better. I know. And you're still staying. Ellie looked at them, this man, these children, this life she'd never expected to find. She thought about Boston, about running about the woman she'd been when she stepped off that stagecoach. That woman had been looking for survival. This woman had found something better. I'm staying, she said. For as long as you'll have me. Nate's smile was tired, bruised, beautiful. Then we're ready. For whatever comes next. The captured man talked. His name was Roy Hendricks, and he'd worked for Whitfield for 6 years. Cutting fences, scattering cattle, setting fires, whatever the boss needed done in the dark. But facing a charge of cattle theft, which was a hanging offense in Montana territory, loosened his tongue faster than whiskey. The territorial marshal arrived 3 days after the incident. A tall man named Thomas Avery, with gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. He interviewed Roy in the barn, while Nate, Walt, and Ellie waited in the house. When Avery emerged, his face was grim. He's given me names, dates, locations. Enough to build a case against Whitfield that'll hold up in territorial court. Nate exhaled. So it's over. Not quite. Avery removed his hat, ran a hand through his hair. Whitfield's got powerful friends. Judges, politicians, businessmen who owe him favors. A case like this could take months to get to trial, maybe longer. Months. At least. And during that time, Whitfield's free to sell assets, destroy evidence, disappear if he wants to. The marshal's jaw tightened. Or retaliate. The word hung in the cold air. You're saying he might come after us, Ellie said. I'm saying you need to be careful, very careful. Men like Whitfield don't go down quietly. When they're cornered, they get dangerous. After Avery left with Roy in custody, Nate stood at the window watching the marshal's wagon disappear down the snow-covered road. He's right, Walt said. This ain't over. This is just the beginning. I know. We should send the children away, somewhere safe until the trial. No. Nate's voice was flat. I won't send my children away from their home. I won't let Whitfield take that from us too. Nate, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. If we run now, if we show fear, he wins. Even if he goes to prison, he wins. Because everyone will know we were scared. Everyone will know the Calloway family broke. There's a difference between breaking and being smart. Not to men like Whitfield. Not to this town. Nate turned from the window. We stay. We keep our heads up. We show everyone that we're not afraid. Walt looked at Ellie, hoping for support. She gave him none. He's right, she said quietly. Running never works. I tried it. I ran from Boston to Montana, and my problems followed me anyway. The only way out is through. Walt threw up his hands. You're both crazy. Probably, Nate agreed, but we're staying. The days that followed were tense and watchful. Nate doubled the guard rotation on the property. No one rode alone anymore. The children were kept close to the house, their freedom curtailed by dangers they only half understood. Jacob spent his time with Ghost, who had recovered enough to walk, now padding around the barn on silent feet. The wolf had grown attached to the boy in a way that still made Walt nervous. That animal's gonna turn on him one day, Walt muttered, watching Jacob feed Ghost scraps from the kitchen. Or protect him with its life, Ellie countered. Some things don't fit in boxes, Walt. Some things surprise you. You sound like you're talking about more than the wolf. She didn't answer. Sarah had changed since the night in the cellar. The hard shell she'd worn like armor had cracked, revealing the frightened, exhausted girl beneath. She let Ellie help with the laundry now, let her take over the evening meal preparation. Even asked her once shyly to teach her how to make the biscuits the men liked so much. "Ma used to make biscuits," Sarah said, as they worked side by side in the kitchen. "But I could never get them right. They always came out flat." "The secret's in the butter," Ellie explained. "It has to be cold, ice cold. You cut it into the flour in pieces, so when it bakes, it creates little pockets of air. That's what makes them rise." Sarah listened intently, her hands mimicking Ellie's movements. When the biscuits came out golden and fluffy, her face lit up with pride. "I did it." "You did." Ma would have been proud. She would be proud right now. Of everything you've done. Everything you've held together. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She turned away quickly, hiding them. "Sarah, I'm fine." "You don't have to be fine. Not with me." The girl was silent for a long moment. Then, "I'm tired, Miss Ellie. I'm so tired of being strong all the time, of pretending I know what I'm doing, of making sure everyone else is okay when I'm not okay, when I haven't been okay since—" Her voice broke. Ellie pulled her into a hug. Sarah resisted for a moment, then collapsed against her, sobbing, the way she hadn't let herself sob in 3 years. "I miss her," Sarah gasped. "I miss her so much, and I can't say that because then everyone else will miss her more, and I have to be the one who holds it together." "No, you don't. Not anymore." Ellie stroked her hair. "I'm here now. You can fall apart if you need to. I'll catch you." They stood there in the warm kitchen, two broken people holding each other up while snow fell soft and quiet outside. That night, Nate found Ellie on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the stars. "Sarah told me what happened," he said, sitting down beside her. "What you said to her. She needed to hear it. She needed someone to say it. Someone who wasn't me." He was quiet for a moment. "I've failed her, Ellie. Her most of all. She was 9 years old when Margaret died, and I let her become a mother to her brothers and sisters because I didn't know what else to do." "You were drowning." "That's not an excuse." "No, but it's an explanation. You did the best you could with what you had. It wasn't enough. It kept them alive. It kept them fed and clothed and sheltered. It kept this family together when everything was trying to tear it apart." Ellie turned to face him. "You didn't fail, Nate. You survived. And now you're doing more than surviving. You're fighting back." He looked at her, really looked at her, and something in his expression shifted. "You know what I thought when I first saw you standing in that yard half frozen, clutching that carpet bag, like it was the only thing keeping you upright?" "What?" "I thought, this woman is going to be trouble." He smiled, a real smile, the first one she'd seen from him. "I was right. You've been nothing but trouble since you got here. Do you regret hiring me?" "Every day." His voice softened. "And I'd do it again in a heartbeat." He reached out and took her hand. His fingers were rough work worn, warm against the cold. "Ellie, I—" A gunshot shattered the night. Nate was on his feet in an instant, pulling Ellie behind him. Another shot, then another coming from the direction of the barn. "Get the children to the cellar. Now. Nate. Now." She ran inside, her heart pounding. Sarah was already in the hallway, Emma in her arms. "I heard. I know. Get everyone to the cellar. Go." They moved fast. Practiced now, gathering the children with terrifying efficiency. Jacob resisted wanting to go to Ghost, but Daniel grabbed him and dragged him toward the cellar. "The wolf can take care of itself. Move." Ellie got them settled in the darkness below, then climbed back up. "Stay here," she told Sarah. "No matter what you hear, stay here." "Where are you going?" "To help." "Miss Ellie, I'm not hiding while they fight alone. I can't." She grabbed the rifle from beside the front door. Nate had insisted she learn to use it after the first fence attack, and ran toward the barn. The scene that met her was chaos. Flames licked at the barn roof. Men on horseback circled the property, firing at shadows. Nate was crouched behind the water trough, returning fire. Walt was down, clutching his shoulder, blood dark against his shirt. "Ellie, get back!" Nate shouted. She ignored him, dropping beside Walt. "How bad?" "Through and through. I'll live." He grimaced. "But I can't shoot worth a damn with my left hand." She took his rifle, checked the chamber, and positioned herself behind the trough. "What are you doing?" "Helping." A rider came close, torch in hand, preparing to throw it onto the barn roof. Ellie aimed, steadied her breath, and squeezed the trigger. The shot took him in the shoulder. He dropped the torch, screaming, and his horse bolted into the darkness. "Good shot," Walt said, surprise in his voice. "My father was a hunter. He taught me before he died." More shots exchanged. More chaos. The barn roof was catching, now flames spreading despite the snow, and inside the cattle were bellowing in terror. "We have to get the animals out," Nate shouted. "We open those doors, we're exposed. We lose that barn, we lose everything." A sound cut through the chaos, a howl long and wild rising from inside the burning structure. Ghost. "Jacob's wolf." Pete's voice high with panic. "He's still in there." Before anyone could move, a figure burst from the shadows, running toward the barn. "Jacob." "No!" Ellie screamed. The boy had climbed out of the cellar, followed the sounds of battle, seen the barn burning, and now he was running straight into hell to save an animal that shouldn't have mattered, but did. Nate started after him, but a hail of bullets drove him back behind cover. Ellie didn't think. She just moved. She ran faster than she'd ever run, her lungs burning, her legs pumping. She caught Jacob just as he reached the barn door, grabbing him around the waist, pulling him back. "Let me go. Ghost is in there." "You can't help him if you're dead." A section of the roof collapsed, sending sparks shooting into the sky. The heat was unbearable, even from this distance. Inside, the howling had stopped. Jacob fought against her grip, sobbing, screaming for his wolf. Then from the flames, a shape emerged. Ghost came through the fire like something from a nightmare. His gray fur singed his eyes, blazing yellow. He was carrying something in his mouth, a small bundle of fur. One of the barn cats. A kitten by the size of it. The wolf dropped the kitten at Jacob's feet, then collapsed in the snow, panting, smoke rising from his scorched coat. "Ghost." Jacob fell to his knees beside the animal. "Ghost, you're alive." The wolf lifted his head and licked the boy's face. Behind them, the battle shifted. The attackers, seeing the barn fully engulfed and their element of surprise gone, began retreating. One by one, they melted into the darkness, leaving behind nothing but hoofprints and shell casings. Nate reached Ellie's side, his face black with smoke and fury. "Jacob, inside, now." "But Ghost." "Bring the wolf. We'll deal with everything in the morning." They limped back to the house, a ragged procession of wounded and exhausted survivors. Walt's shoulder was bound with strips of Ellie's petticoat. Pete had a graze on his arm. Charlie was uninjured, but shaking so hard he couldn't hold his rifle. The children emerged from the cellar, their faces white with fear. "Pa," Sarah grabbed Nate's arm. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine. Everyone's fine. The barn. Gone, but we're alive. That's what matters." Emma started to cry. Lily joined her. Daniel stood rigid and silent, his young face carved from stone. Jacob sat on the floor, Ghost's massive head in his lap, the rescued kitten mewling in his arms. "He saved it," Jacob said wonderingly. "Ghost went back into the fire to save a kitten." "Animals surprise you," Ellie said softly. "Some things don't fit in boxes." She looked at Nate and found him already looking at her. Something passed between them. Gratitude, fear, love that neither had named yet. "You could have been killed," he said. "So could you." "That's different." "No, it isn't. Not anymore." Dawn came gray and cold. The barn was a smoking ruin, black timbers rising from the snow like broken bones. The cattle had scattered in the chaos, some to the pastures, some into Whitfield's land, some simply gone. Nate stood in what had been the doorway, staring at the destruction. 14 years, he said quietly. My father built this barn 14 years ago. I helped him raise the roof beams. I carved my initials in the corner post." Ellie stood beside him silent. "He said it would stand for 100 years. He said our grandchildren would stable their horses here." Nate's voice cracked. He was wrong. Buildings can be rebuilt. With what? We've got no money, no credit, no way to make spring sale numbers. Even if Whitfield goes to prison, we're finished. You don't know that. Yes, I do. He turned to face her, and she saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Defeat. I've run the numbers 100 times. Without that barn, without the cattle we lost, we can't make it through spring. The bank will call our loan. Whitfield wins prison or no prison. There has to be another way. There isn't. I've looked. I've prayed. I've done everything except accept the truth. His shoulders slumped. It's over, Ellie. I've lost. She grabbed his arms, forcing him to look at her. You haven't lost. Not while you're still breathing. Not while your children are still healthy. Not while people care about what happens to you. What people? The town thinks I'm a scandal. Whitfield owns everyone who matters. The marshal can't help us with money. Who's left? Me. I'm left. And what can you do? The question wasn't cruel. It was genuinely curious, genuinely desperate, as if he was begging her to give him a reason to hope. I don't know yet, but I'll find something. I'll figure it out. Why? Why do you care so much about this place, about us? You could leave. Find another job somewhere easier. Nobody would blame you. I'd blame me. Ellie's grip tightened. You asked me once why I came here. I told you I needed work. That was true, but it wasn't the whole truth. What's the whole truth? I came here because I was looking for something. I didn't know what it was, a home, a purpose, a reason to keep going. But I found it here. I found it in your children, in your stubborn refusal to give up, in the way you looked at me like I was worth something, even when I didn't believe it myself. Tears were streaming down her face now, freezing on her cheeks. I love this ranch, she said. I love these children. I love... She stopped, the word catching in her throat. What? Nate's voice was barely a whisper. What do you love? You. God help me, I love you. And I won't stand by and watch you give up. Not now. Not ever. The words hung in the frozen air between them. Then Nate moved. He pulled her against him, his arms wrapping around her with desperate strength, his face buried in her hair. Say it again, he breathed. I love you. Again. I love you, Nathaniel Calloway, all of you. Your children, your land, your broken barn, and your stubborn pride. I love all of it. He kissed her, then a kiss that tasted like smoke and tears and something that might have been hope. She kissed him back with everything she had, pouring 3 months of fear and longing and carefully guarded feelings into a single moment. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing hard. I love you too, Nate said. I think I have since that first night when you sat across from me in the kitchen and told me the truth about your husband, about your guilt, about all the things you were ashamed of. Why didn't you say anything? Because I was scared. Because I didn't deserve you. Because loving someone again felt like betraying Margaret. And now I know that loving you isn't betraying her. It's honoring her. She wanted me to be happy. She wanted the children to have a mother. She told me at the end not to spend my life alone. But I can't replace her. You're not replacing her. You're continuing her. You're giving our family what she would have given if she'd lived. He cupped her face in his hands. You're not a replacement, Ellie. You're a miracle. They stood in the ruins of everything he'd built, surrounded by destruction and uncertainty and impossible odds. But they stood together. And for the first time since the barn burned, Nate Calloway believed they might actually survive. Word spread faster than wildfire. By noon the next day, half of Cedar Creek knew about the attack on the Calloway ranch. By evening, the other half had heard 3 different versions of the story, each more dramatic than the last. Ellie found out when she rode into town for medical supplies for Walt. Dr. Samuel Hayes met her at the door of his office, his face grave. "I heard what happened. How's Walt?" "He'll live, but we need bandages, antiseptic, anything you can spare." "Come inside." He led her to a small room lined with shelves of medicines and supplies. "I've put together a kit, no charge." "Doctor, I can't." "You can, and you will." He pressed the kit into her hands. What Whitfield did was criminal. Everyone knows it. And some of us are starting to remember that standing by while evil happens is its own kind of sin. Ellie stared at him. "You believe us?" "I've treated too many accidents on ranches Whitfield wanted to buy. Burns, broken bones, men who fell off horses that had never thrown anyone before." His jaw tightened. "I should have spoken up years ago. I was afraid. We all were. And now I'm tired of being afraid." When Ellie walked out of the doctor's office, she found a small crowd gathered in the street. Women she recognized from her first day in Cedar Creek. Men who'd looked through her like she was invisible. Children who'd been told to stay away from the scandal at the Callaway Ranch. They were watching her. Cora Pritchard stepped forward, her face a complicated mixture of shame and determination. "Mrs. Callaway." "I'm not Mrs. Callaway. I'm Miss Mercer." "I know. I'm sorry. I just—" Cora took a breath. "We heard about the attack, about how you ran into the fire to save the boy, about how you fought beside the men." "I did what anyone would do." "No. You did what most of us were too afraid to do. What we've been too afraid to do for 20 years. Cora glanced back at the crowd. "We've let Marcus Whitfield bully this valley for too long. We've watched him destroy good people because we were scared of what he'd do to us, and we're ashamed." Ellie didn't know what to say. "We can't undo what's been done," Cora continued. "We can't give back the years of gossip and judgment and cruelty. But we can help now, if you'll let us." "Help how?" A man stepped forward. Ellie recognized him as the owner of the general store, the one who'd refused to serve her that first day. "We've been talking, all of us, about what happened to your barn, about the cattle you lost, about the money you need to make it through spring." He cleared his throat. "We want to help rebuild. We can't pay. We're not asking for payment. We're asking for forgiveness." The word hung in the cold air. Ellie thought about everything she'd endured since arriving in Cedar Creek. The whispers, the stares, the deliberate cruelty of people who'd decided she was worthless before they even knew her name. She thought about how easy it would be to refuse, to tell them they were too late, to let bitterness poison any chance of reconciliation. Then she thought about Sarah teaching her to make biscuits, about Jacob risking his life for a wolf, about Nate standing in the ruins of his barn, finally letting himself hope. Forgiveness wasn't about what other people deserved. It was about what you were willing to carry. "We could use the help," she said finally. "The barn's gone. Most of our cattle are scattered. And we've got about 3 months to rebuild before spring, or we lose everything." Cora's face lit up. "Then we'll be there, tomorrow morning, all of us." They came at dawn, wagons loaded with lumber tool supplies. Men and women and children, more people than Ellie could count, streaming up the road to the Callaway Ranch like an army of redemption. Nate stood on the porch watching in stunned silence. "What is this?" he asked when Ellie joined him. "Cedar Creek." "But these are the people who—" "I know. They're trying to make it right." Cora Pritchard approached the porch flanked by her husband, the minister, and a half-dozen other town leaders. "Mr. Callaway, we've come to help rebuild your barn and to apologize for not helping sooner." Nate looked at Ellie, then back at the crowd. "I don't understand." "Neither do we entirely. But Miss Mercer—" Cora glanced at Ellie with something like respect. "She showed us what courage looks like, and it shamed us into remembering what community is supposed to mean." Nate was quiet for a long moment. Ellie could see him wrestling with pride, with anger, with the weight of years of isolation and judgment. Then Sarah appeared in the doorway, Emma on her hip. "Pa, what's happening? People are here to help us, sweetheart. Help us." Sarah's eyes widened as she took in the crowd. All these people. All these people. Jacob pushed past his sister Ghost, padding at his heels. The wolf's appearance caused a ripple of alarm in the crowd, but Jacob just grinned. "Is it like a barn raising I read about those in a book? Everyone comes together and builds something in one day." "Something like that," Nate said. His voice was rough. Daniel appeared last, his serious face taking in the situation with characteristic calm. "We should get started," he said. "There's a lot of work to do." And just like that, the barriers broke. Men who'd refused to do business with Nate were suddenly shoulder to shoulder with his ranch hands, hauling timber and hammering nails. Women who'd whispered about Ellie were in the kitchen helping her cook enough food to feed an army. Children who'd been told to avoid the Callaway kids were playing in the snow with Jacob and Lily, their laughter rising like music. By midday, the skeleton of a new barn was taking shape. By evening, the walls were up. By the end of the second day, a barn stood where ruins had been. Not as large as the original, but solid. Sturdy. Built by the hands of people who'd finally remembered that neighbors were supposed to help each other. On the third night after the last helpers had gone home, Nate gathered his family and the ranch hands in the kitchen. "I want to say something," he began. "About what's happened this week, about what it means." Everyone was quiet listening. 3 days ago I was ready to give up. I thought we'd lost everything. I thought there was no way forward. He looked at Ellie. "Someone told me I was wrong, that there's always a way forward if you're willing to fight for it." I didn't believe her. "Do you believe her now?" Sarah asked quietly. "I believe in this family. I believe in the people who came to help us. And I believe," his voice caught, "that your mother would be proud of all of us." Emma, sitting in Ellie's lap, pointed at the window. "Snow," she said. Her first word to Ellie spoken with the simple directness of a child who'd finally decided to trust. Ellie's eyes filled with tears. "That's right, sweetheart. Snow." Outside, fat flakes were falling soft and silent, covering the scars of battle, the evidence of destruction, the wounds that were slowly beginning to heal. 2 weeks later, Marcus Whitfield was arrested. The territorial marshal rode in with 6 deputies, a warrant signed by a judge, who Whitfield's money hadn't been able to reach. They found him at his mansion, surrounded by lawyers who couldn't help him trying to burn documents that Roy Hendricks had already described in detail. Ellie heard the news from Dr. Hayes, who rode out specially to tell them. "He's done," the doctor said. "The evidence is overwhelming. They've got testimony from a dozen ranchers he's driven out over the years. They've got financial records showing bribes to judges and sheriffs. They've even got letters planning the attack on your property." "Will he hang?" Nate asked. "Probably not. His lawyers are good enough to avoid that. But he's going to prison for a long time, and his property is being seized to pay restitution to his victims." The doctor smiled. "Including you." "Restitution. You're entitled to compensation for the cattle you lost, the barn that was destroyed, the damages you've suffered. It won't be a fortune, but it should be enough to get you through spring." Ellie felt her knees go weak. She grabbed the back of a chair for support. "It's really over," she whispered. "It's really over." That night, Nate found her on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the stars. "You should be celebrating," he said. "I am celebrating." Quietly. He sat down beside her. "What are you thinking about?" "About how close we came. To losing everything. To giving up." She turned to face him. "About how different my life would be if I'd never seen that advertisement for a ranch cook in Montana." "Do you regret coming here?" "Not for a single second." He took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "Ellie, there's something I need to ask you." "Ask." "I've been thinking about this for weeks, since before the fire, really. But I kept finding reasons to wait. The timing wasn't right. The situation was too uncertain. I didn't know if you felt the same way. Nate, let me finish. Please. He took a breath. I'm not a young man anymore. I've got 5 children, a ranch that nearly went under, a reputation that's only just starting to recover. I don't have much to offer except hard work and a heart that's been broken and mended and broken again. You have more than you know. Maybe. But here's what I'm trying to say. He turned to face her, fully taking both her hands in his. I love you, Ellie Mercer. I love you more than I thought I could love anyone again. And I want to spend whatever years I have left loving you more every day. Are you? I'm asking you to marry me, to be my wife, to be a mother to my children, a partner in this ranch, a family in every way that matters. His voice shook slightly. I know it's a lot to ask. I know you came here looking for work, not a husband. And if you need time to think, yes. He blinked. Yes, you need time. Yes, I'll marry you. You what? I said yes. Ellie laughed, tears streaming down her face. I've been waiting for you to ask for weeks, you stubborn, wonderful man. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Nate stared at her for a moment, as if he couldn't quite believe what he was hearing. Then his face broke into a smile so wide it transformed him, made him look like the young man he must have been before loss carved its mark into his soul. He kissed her deep and thorough, a kiss that promised forever. When they finally broke apart, breathless and laughing, Sarah's voice came from the doorway. Finally. They turned to find all 5 children watching from the house. Sarah was smiling, actually smiling, her arms crossed in mock exasperation. Daniel was nodding with quiet approval. Lily was bouncing on her toes. Jacob was pumping his fist in victory. And Emma, held in Sarah's arms, was reaching toward Ellie with both hands. Mama, she said. Mama, Mama. Ellie's heart stopped. Did she just... She's been practicing, Sarah said. We all agreed. If Pa ever got the courage to ask, and if you said yes, Emma would call you Mama. You planned this? We've known since Christmas that Pa was going to propose. He's not as subtle as he thinks he is. Sarah's smile softened. We wanted you to know that it's not just him asking. It's all of us. We want you to be our family. Officially. Ellie looked at Nate, at the children, at the life she'd somehow stumbled into and made her own. Come here, she said, her voice thick with tears. All of you, come here. They piled onto the porch in a tangle of arms and legs and laughter. Jacob talking too fast as always. Lily asking if she could be a flower girl. Daniel saying he'd help with the planning. Emma still reaching for Ellie, still saying Mama like it was the most natural word in the world. And Sarah standing slightly apart, watching with eyes that glistened. Ellie reached out and pulled her into the embrace. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For letting me in. For trusting me. For being brave enough to love again. Sarah's arms tightened around her. Thank you for staying, for fighting, for not giving up on us. I never will. I promise you that. I believe you. Sarah pulled back, wiping her eyes. I finally believe you. The wedding was small, held in the new barn on a Sunday afternoon in late February. The whole town came, or at least it felt that way. People who'd once whispered about the scandal at the Callaway Ranch now came with gifts and well wishes and genuine smiles. Cora Pritchard organized the decorations. Dr. Hayes served as a witness. The minister performed the ceremony with tears in his eyes, saying it was the most beautiful thing he'd done in 30 years of preaching. Ellie wore a dress that Sarah and Lily had helped her make, simple white cotton with lace at the collar that had belonged to Margaret. Nate had offered it hesitantly, and Ellie had accepted it with reverence, understanding what it meant for him to share that piece of his first wife with his second. She would have wanted this, he said when he saw her in it. She would have wanted you. I hope I can honor her memory. You already do, every day, in everything you are. The children stood at the front of the barn, scrubbed clean and dressed in their best. Sarah held Emma, who had a crown of winter flowers in her hair. Daniel stood straight and serious beside his father. Jacob clutched Ghost's collar, having won the argument about whether the wolf could attend. Lily scattered dried petals down the aisle, taking her flower girl duties very seriously. When Ellie walked toward Nate, the whole world seemed to narrow to just the two of them. This man who'd given her a chance when no one else would. This family who'd become her own. This life that had risen from the ashes of everything she'd lost. "I take you, Eleanor Mercer, to be my wife," Nate said, his voice steady and sure. "To have and to hold from this day forward. For better, for worse. For richer, for poorer. In sickness and in health. Until death do us part." "I take you, Nathaniel Calloway, to be my husband," Ellie replied. "To have and to hold from this day forward. For better, for worse. For richer, for poorer. In sickness and in health. Until death do us part." The minister pronounced them husband and wife. Nate kissed her while the crowd cheered. And somewhere Ellie was sure Margaret Calloway was smiling. The celebration lasted well into the evening. Food and music and dancing. The barn filled with warmth and laughter and the simple joy of people who'd come through fire and found each other on the other side. As the party wound down and the last guest departed, Ellie stood at the barn door, looking out at the ranch that was now officially her home. Nate came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Happy?" he asked. "More than I ever thought possible." "Any regrets?" She turned in his arms, looking up at him with eyes that held no shadows. "Only that I didn't find you sooner." He kissed her forehead. "You found us exactly when we needed you. That's all that matters." Sarah appeared in the doorway, Emma asleep on her shoulder. "Pa, miss." She stopped, corrected herself. "Mama. The little ones are tired. Should I put them to bed?" "Mama." The word still made Ellie's heart skip. "I'll help you," she said. Together they carried the younger children to their beds. Jacob was already half asleep, mumbling about wolves and weddings. Lily went down easily exhausted from dancing. Emma barely stirred when Ellie laid her in her crib. Daniel waited in the hallway, his serious face showing something that might have been hope. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for making Pa happy again. Thank you for letting me try." He nodded once, then disappeared into his room. Sarah lingered. "It won't always be easy," she said. "We're a difficult family. We fight. We're stubborn. We carry too much grief." "So do I." "I know." Sarah smiled. "That's why you fit." She hugged Ellie quickly, fiercely, then walked away before either of them could cry. That night, lying in the darkness beside her husband, Ellie thought about the journey that had brought her here. The train from Boston, the frozen stagecoach, the cold bench outside the mercantile. All the small choices and desperate decisions that had led to this moment. "What are you thinking about?" Nate asked, his voice sleepy. "About how different everything is. About how I came here with nothing and found everything." "You didn't come with nothing. You came with yourself. That was always enough." She pressed closer to him, feeling his heartbeat against her cheek. "I love you, Nathaniel Calloway." "I love you too, Eleanor Calloway." Her new name. Their new life. Outside, the snow had stopped. The stars were bright. And somewhere in the darkness, a wolf howled at the moon, singing for the family he'd chosen and the home he'd found. The same song Ellie thought that they were all singing. The song of belonging. Spring came slowly to Montana that year. The snow retreated inch by inch, revealing brown earth and new grass pushing up through the frozen ground. The creek ran high with meltwater singing over stones that had been silent all winter. And on the Calloway Ranch, life began again. Ellie woke on the first warm morning to find Nate already gone from their bed. She found him on the porch, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold and pink. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked, settling beside him. "Didn't want to miss this." He gestured at the view. First spring sunrise as a married man. Felt like something worth seeing. "How does it look?" like hope. He turned to her, and his eyes held something she'd never seen there before. Peace. Like we actually made it. They had made it. Against every odd, through every obstacle, they had survived the winter that was supposed to break them. The restitution money from Whitfield's seized assets had arrived 2 weeks ago, enough to pay off the bank loan and leave a small cushion for emergencies. The cattle that had scattered during the attack had been recovered, most of them, and the herd was healthy. The new barn stood solid and strong, a testament to the community that had built it. But more than that, they had survived as a family. Sarah came out onto the porch, her hair still mussed from sleep, and leaned against Ellie's shoulder. "Morning, Ma." Ma. Sarah had started using the word a month ago, casually, as if it had always been natural. The first time she'd said it, Ellie had cried for an hour. "Morning, sweetheart. You're up early." "Couldn't sleep either. Too excited." "About what?" Sarah grinned. "Daniel told me last night. He's been accepted to the school in Bozeman, the one that trains teachers." Ellie's heart swelled. Daniel had been studying for months, borrowing books from Dr. Hayes, working through lessons by lamplight after his chores were done. He wanted to be a teacher, he'd confessed one night. Wanted to help other children learn the way he'd had to teach himself. When did he find out? Letter came yesterday. He was going to tell everyone at breakfast, but I couldn't keep the secret. Nate smiled. "That boy's going to do great things." "He already has," Ellie said. "You all have." The children gathered for breakfast with an energy that Ellie had come to love. Jacob talking about Ghost's latest tricks, the wolf now fully accepted as part of the family. Lily reading aloud from a book of fairy tales that Ellie had bought her in town. Emma chattering in the toddler language she'd developed, half words and half music. Daniel quiet but smiling, waiting for his moment. When he finally announced his acceptance, the table erupted. "You're going to be a teacher." Jacob's eyes went wide. "Does that mean you get to tell people what to do all day?" "It means I get to help people learn." "Same thing." "It's not the same thing at all." "Is too." "Is not." "Children," Ellie said, but she was laughing. They were all laughing, even Daniel, who rarely let himself be so unguarded. After breakfast, Nate took Ellie's hand and led her outside. "Walk with me." They walked down to the creek, to the spot where they'd stood so many times during the darkest days of winter. The water was running clear and fast, catching sunlight like scattered diamonds. "I need to tell you something," Nate said. "That sounds serious." "It is." He turned to face her, and she saw nervousness in his eyes for the first time in months. "I've been thinking about the future, about what we want to build here, and I realize there's something I never properly gave you." "You've given me everything." "Not this." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "When we got married, everything happened so fast. I didn't have time to get you a ring. I thought I'd do it later when things settled down. But things never settled down, and then I started worrying it was too late, that you'd think I forgot." "Nate, I don't need—" "I know you don't need it. That's not the point." He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small diamond. "This was my mother's. She gave it to Margaret when we got married, and Margaret—" His voice caught. "Margaret made me promise that if I ever loved again, I'd give it to her." Ellie's eyes filled with tears. She said a lot of things at the end. Most of them I couldn't hear, I was so lost in grief. But I remember that. She said, 'Don't close your heart, Nate. Promise me. When you find someone worth loving, give her my blessing.'" He took her hand. "This is her blessing, Ellie. And mine. And our children's. All of us giving you everything we have." He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "I don't know what to say," Ellie whispered. "Say you'll stay. Say you'll grow old with me on this land. Say you'll be here for every spring sunrise and every winter storm and every ordinary day in between." "I already said yes to all of that." "Then say it again. I'll never get tired of hearing it." She kissed him, tasting tears and joy and the sweet promise of years to come. "Yes," she said against his lips. Yes to everything. Forever. The months that followed were the happiest of Ellie's life. She learned the rhythms of the ranch, the endless cycle of work that kept a cattle operation running. She learned to ride properly, not just the basic skills she'd picked up in Boston, but the real riding that ranch life demanded. She learned to mend fences and check cattle, and read the weather signs that meant the difference between a good day and a disaster. But more than that, she learned what it meant to be a mother. Sarah blossomed under her attention, the hard shell of the girl who'd had to grow up too fast, finally cracking open to reveal the young woman underneath. She laughed more. She let herself be silly. She started talking about boys in town, about dresses she wanted, about dreams she'd never dared voice before. Daniel left for Bozeman in September, tall and serious, and ready to become the man he was meant to be. Ellie cried when he hugged her goodbye. "Thank you," he whispered, "for giving us back our father, for giving us you." Lily became Ellie's shadow, following her through the house, helping with cooking and cleaning, asking endless questions about everything. She had a curious mind and a gentle heart, and Ellie saw in her the makings of something extraordinary. Jacob remained Jacob, wild and joyful, and absolutely certain that Ghost was the best wolf in the history of wolves. The animal had become a fixture on the ranch, accepted by even Walt, who still grumbled, but could sometimes be seen slipping ghost scraps from his plate. And Emma, sweet Emma, who had watched her mother die before she could remember her, finally had a mother again. She called Ellie Mama, with the easy confidence of a child who had never doubted that she was loved. Fall brought the harvest of their efforts. The cattle sale in October was the best the ranch had seen in years. Prices were high, the herd was healthy, and for the first time in longer than anyone could remember, the Callaway Ranch was operating in the black. Nate brought the news home with a grin that made him look 20 years younger. "We did it," he said, sweeping Ellie into his arms. "We actually did it. We're not just surviving anymore, we're thriving. We did it together. That's the only way I want to do anything from now on." Winter came again, but this time it held no terror. The barn was solid, stocked with plenty of feed. The house was warm, filled with the sounds of children and laughter and love. The cellar was full of preserved food, enough to last until spring and beyond. On Christmas Eve, the family gathered around the fire, the same fire that had witnessed so much pain and healing over the past year. "I want to say something," Sarah announced. She stood up, her face serious, and pulled a piece of paper from her pocket. "I've been working on this for weeks. It's not very good, but I wanted to try." "What is it?" Lily asked. "A poem. About our family." She unfolded the paper and began to read. "We were broken, all of us, in different ways. Lost in grief and fear and lonely days. Then she came a stranger from the East and stayed when staying was the least that she could do. She fought for us. She loved us. She became something new. Not a replacement for what we lost, but a different kind of grace. She showed us that love isn't about filling empty space, but about making room for something more. She opened every door we'd closed against the world, and taught us that the bravest thing you'll ever do is let yourself be loved." Silence fell when she finished. Ellie was crying openly. Nate's eyes were bright. Even Jacob, for once, had nothing to say. "Sarah," Ellie breathed, "that was beautiful. It's true, every word." Sarah carefully folded the paper and handed it to Ellie. "For you, so you never forget what you mean to us." Ellie pulled her into a hug, and soon all the children had joined in a pile of arms and tears and love that threatened to overwhelm her. "Best Christmas ever," Jacob declared when they finally untangled. "Best Christmas yet," Nate corrected. "There'll be more, many more. This is just the beginning." The new year brought changes no one expected. In February, Ellie realized she was pregnant. She told Nate on a quiet evening, the children in bed, the fire burning low. She'd been nervous all day, unsure how he would react, whether he would be happy or scared, or something in between. "You're sure?" he asked, his voice strange. "The doctor confirmed it today." He was quiet for a long moment. Then his face crumpled, and he pulled her into his arms, his whole body shaking. "Nate, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Everything is right. I just—" He pulled back, wiping his eyes. "I never thought I'd have this again. A chance to do it right from the beginning. To be there for everything, not lost in grief or struggling to survive. You were there for your children. You did the best you could." "I know, but this time—" He placed his hand on her belly, gentle and reverent. "This time, I get to be present. Really present. For every moment." The children took the news with characteristic variety. Sarah immediately declared herself the baby's protector. "I'm going to teach her everything. All the things I wish someone had taught me." "What if it's a boy?" Jacob asked. "Then I'll teach him everything too. Boys need to know how to cook and clean just as much as girls." Daniel, home for a visit, shook Nate's hand with adult solemnity. "Congratulations, Pa. You deserve this happiness." Lily wanted to help choose names. Jacob wanted to know if the baby could have a wolf too. Emma was confused about the whole concept, but excited because everyone else was excited. The pregnancy progressed through spring and into summer. Ellie had never felt so loved, so cared for, so completely surrounded by people who wanted to protect her. Nate wouldn't let her lift anything heavier than a spoon. Sarah took over most of the household duties. Even Ghost seemed to understand staying close to Ellie whenever she sat outside, his yellow eyes watchful. The baby came on a warm August night with Dr. Hayes in attendance, and the whole family waiting anxiously in the next room. "It's a girl," the doctor announced, and Ellie heard cheering from beyond the door. Nate came in first, his face pale with worry, until he saw her holding the baby, healthy and pink, and absolutely perfect. "She's beautiful," he whispered. "She has your eyes. She has your strength." He sat on the bed beside her, one arm around her shoulders, one hand gently touching his daughter's cheek. What should we call her? Ellie had been thinking about this for months, about names and meanings and the weight of history. "Margaret," she said, "after the woman who made all this possible. The woman who loved you first, who gave you these beautiful children, who told you not to close your heart." Nate's eyes filled with tears. "Margaret Eleanor Calloway," he said slowly. "Maggie for short." "Maggie, I like that." The door burst open and children flooded in, unable to wait any longer. They gathered around the bed, peering at their new sister with wonder. "She's so small," Lily breathed. "She'll get bigger," Sarah assured her. "Can she have a wolf?" Jacob asked. "When she's old enough." "We'll see." Emma reached out one small finger and touched the baby's hand. Maggie's tiny fingers curled around it, holding on. "Sister," Emma said solemnly. "My sister." "That's right, sweetheart. Your sister." Standing there, surrounded by her family, holding new life in her arms, Ellie thought about the woman she'd been 2 years ago. Desperate, broken, stepping off a stagecoach into a town that had already decided she was guilty. She'd had nothing but a carpet bag and 47 cents and the stubborn refusal to disappear. Now, she had everything. The years that followed were not always easy. There were droughts and hard winters and the ordinary struggles of ranch life. Daniel graduated from his teacher training and came home to open a school in Cedar Creek. Sarah married a young rancher from a neighboring valley, a good man who adored her and had children of her own. Lily became a writer, sending stories to newspapers across the territory. Jacob inherited his father's love of the land and eventually took over running the ranch. Emma became a nurse, traveling to remote communities to help people who had no other care. And Maggie, little Margaret, Eleanor Calloway, grew up knowing nothing but love. "Tell me the story again," she would ask Ellie on winter nights curled up by the fire. "The story of how you came here." And Ellie would tell her about the train from Boston, the frozen stagecoach, the undertaker's wagon, and the woman with the blue hand. About Cora Pritchard and her cruel words. About the old man who predicted the worst winter in 20 years. About Walt Gruff and Suspicious, who became one of her closest friends before he passed in his sleep at the age of 73. About Ghost the wolf, who saved a kitten from a burning barn and lived to be 15, dying peacefully with his head in Jacob's lap. About Marcus Whitfield, who spent 8 years in territorial prison and died alone, unmourned, forgotten. About the barn raising that saved them, the wedding in February, the ring that Margaret had blessed. About 5 motherless children who taught her what family really meant. About a man who hired her to cook and ended up giving her the world. And they lived happily ever after. Maggie would ask, already knowing the answer. We lived, Ellie would reply. We're still living. Happily ever after isn't an ending, sweetheart. It's a choice you make every single day. On the morning of her 20th wedding anniversary, Ellie woke to find the bed empty beside her. She found Nate where she always found him, on important mornings on the porch, watching the sunrise, coffee in hand. She settled beside him, and he wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. 20 years, he said. Can you believe it? Some days it feels like 20 minutes. Other days it feels like 100 years. The good kind of 100 years. The best kind. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the light spread across their land. The ranch had grown over the decades, expanding to include the territory that had once been Whitfield's. The Callaway name was respected throughout Montana, now synonymous with integrity and hard work, and the kind of stubborn courage that built empires from nothing. I've been thinking, Nate said. That sounds dangerous. He smiled. I've been thinking about that day you arrived. How scared I was. How sure I was that hiring you was a mistake. And now I know it was the best decision I ever made. He turned to face her, his hair completely silver, now his face lined with years and weather, but his eyes still holding the same warmth they'd held when he first let himself love her. You saved us, Ellie. All of us. This ranch, this family, me. We were drowning, and you threw us a rope and refused to let go. You saved me right back. I came here empty, and you filled me up. Guess we saved each other then. Guess we did. He kissed her soft and sweet, a kiss that held 20 years of mornings and 1,000 more to come. From inside the house came the sounds of family arriving. Sarah's voice directing her children, Daniel's laugh, Lily arguing with Jacob about something trivial, Emma singing to Maggie's youngest, the new generation mixing with the old life, continuing its endless cycle. Ready to go inside? Nate asked. Ellie looked at the view one more time. The mountains she'd learned to love, the land she'd fought for, the home she'd built from ashes and determination, and the simple refusal to give up. In a minute, she said, I just want to remember this. Remember what? Everything. All of it. Every hard day and beautiful moment that brought us here. She leaned her head against his shoulder. I never want to forget how far we've come. You won't. None of us will. That's what family's for, remembering together. She thought about the woman she'd been stepping off that stagecoach with nothing but a carpet bag and a broken heart. She thought about what she'd found, what she'd built, what she'd become. She'd come to Montana looking for work. She'd found home. Come on, she said, finally standing and offering him her hand. Our family's waiting. They walked inside together into the warmth and noise and beautiful chaos of the life they'd built. 20 years. 5 children. 1 grandchild with more on the way. A ranch that had nearly been lost and had become a legacy instead. It had all started with a desperate widow and a stubborn widower and a winter that was supposed to break them both. Instead, it had made them whole. And that, Ellie thought as she gathered her family around her, was the only happy ending that ever really mattered. Not the absence of struggle, not the guarantee of ease, but the presence of people worth fighting for and the courage to fight for them every single day for as long as love would let her. She had 47 cents when she arrived in Cedar Creek. She left with everything.